you're looking to build value-added services or products to your drone deliverables, then it might be very important for you to know the difference between the open source technologies that are out there and closed source for processing drone imagery. And obviously, we share 3D visualization techniques, right? You capture this awesome 3D model. Now, what do you do with it? How do you show it off? How do you share it, et cetera, et cetera? And yeah, I want the class and the workshop to be very interactive. We've done this multiple times this year through the Las Vegas Drone Meetup, which I host. So we just get more out of this when you ask questions, please. So please feel free to stop me at any time. We have about 40 pages of slides to go through. So we try to pace it, and we have a lunch break, where we have food as well. And I'll go to the agenda here. Okay, about me. So my name is Osari. I'm Dimitri Nobar. Go by Dimitri. I was actually born in the city, Nigeria, and I've been in there for about 10 years. And I studied architecture at UNLV. I've been in Part 107 for about 6 years now. I'm actually a grad of Pilot Institute. So 6 years ago, I got my Part 107 through Pilot Institute, and a lot of things changed from there. I started flying drones when I was in college, and during grad school, I started Area AI as a company that creates software to visualize drone data. Focused on 3D modeling, supplying photogrammetry as well as LiDAR. We have LiDAR drones, but it's massive, so that's the point. We're focusing on photogrammetry today. I'm also a level 1 UAS thermographer, so I can read and understand and interpret thermography imagery that you can use for solar panels and heat spots or utilities and things of that sort. I am also a certified geospatial developer. Why does this matter? It's because we're building a geospatial software. Think about Google Earth. So I'll show you some of the stuff. We'll build a Google Earth application on a game engine that lets you visualize all of the diverse data sets that you capture with a drone. So that's me. Yeah, if you have any more questions, please go ahead and ask. So here's our agenda. We're looking at about 4 hours of content. We want to hopefully finish early so that we can relax and put some of the other programs that we have for the day. So we'll go through to introduce ourselves. Obviously, we'll look at vision planning and data capture, drones, how you fly the drone, what parameters you use, things of that nature. We'll also go over concepts about how to fly based on the angle that you have, cover that as well. And then we'll start with the data processing pipeline. And I sent an email out yesterday to these software programs. If you don't have them, it's fine. I have them here in drives. If you have laptops, I'd like to copy them and give them to you. If you do not, it's okay. I'll also send you these files at the end. We'll have lunch around noon, so about 2 hours from now. And then the data processing pipeline has a series of steps. So this morning we'll cover some of those steps, and in the afternoon we'll cover the remaining steps as well. And then towards the end, we will learn how to take the drone images and create a 3D model, and then we'll share some 3D visualization and sharing techniques. Capture this stuff, we want to share with people, clients, other stakeholders, team members, et cetera. While this workshop is focused on photogrammetry, I also wanted to share about LiDAR. And I think it's definitely used more at an enterprise level. So some of you that are government employees or working with the government, thinking about things like utilities, capturing data that you might see under the tree just because of the penetration of the LiDAR. I'll show you some demo. We actually scan Cornerstone Park, which is where you're going to be tomorrow. So you get to actually have this entire park that will scan LiDAR technology as well. We'll talk about the difference between LiDAR and photogrammetry. And that'll be okay. This is just more in depth for you when you download the presentation so you can see everything that we're going through. Okay, let's talk about workshop files and software installation. Yes, Peter.
One quick question. So all these slides are going to be sent via email, the whole slideshow?
Correct. Yeah. Slides, not just the slides. We capture data that you need to process or run through the entire process. Right? It takes a long time to run this process, so it wouldn't make sense for us to run it here. I'm providing those data sets to you as well. And you'll be able to run it on your own when you're home. You have my email, send me questions. This stuff is really straightforward. I'm probably going to go out and learn out about a few things just because I think it makes you a better 3D modeler than just, taking your drone out there. Because for the majority of the time, the drone is just flying itself, right? It's using waypoints, capturing the data. There are times where you have to be in control. Not just in the data capture process for safety or capturing exactly what you want, not just what the computer thinks you want. And also doing the processing and being involved in how you go from drone images to the final product. The way it is, it's so simple now that you can go out, fly the drone, upload images, and get your results. But I think this workshop, we want to go a little bit more and understand the processes behind photogrammetry. I think it will make all the difference with how your computer goes turn out at the end of the day. So let's look at the data sets that we are working with. So like I said, this is the Henderson Multi-Generational Center. We captured about 738 images using the drone, this specific drone right here, the DJI 3 Enterprise. We flew these drones with RTK corrections. We'll talk about that later on. Real-time kinematics to improve the accuracy of the maps. And we captured oblique and air imagery. We'll talk about what those are. Essentially, oblique imagery, capturing an angle to see the walls and the sides of something. And the air is just perpendicular 90 degrees to the ground. Go more in depth into this later on. Well, these are the files, if you have access to these files. Also, Cornerstone. Cornerstone is where we actually capture some LiDAR data. Some LiDAR stuff, but when you have a site sheet, to also give you access to the data sets itself. Well, actually, for the Cornerstone part, the imagery is less, about 113. I created this just because if anybody that actually wants to run this process, I think we should be able to run 113 images right during the span of this workshop. For 700 images, you might get a couple hours for that. So it's really up to you. You have access to the data sets on the Apple Drive. So the software program that we use, we're primarily looking at two photogrammetry software. One is an open source and one is closed. So Web ODM is an open source. ODM stands for Open Drone App. It's an open source application that you can download for free to process your drone images into a 3D model. To download it for free, with a disclaimer, you kind of have to set up Docker, you have to set up all these environments, but they also have a very, very affordable, ready to download exe file and just download and install on your computer. And I'm a big open source guy, so I like to support open source projects. So, I mean, WebODM, I think it's about $30 a month compared to some of the closed source that would be thousands or several hundreds a month. So that's the open source tool that you can use to create everything that we're going to put together in the day. There's also a closed source tool for creating Scan. This is a software program by the company Epic Games. Has anybody ever heard of Unreal Engine? Fortnite? You have kids that play Fortnite? All right, so Fortnite is obviously a video game. The company that makes Fortnite, Epic Games, also makes photogrammetry software because they involve in creating games, so they have to create 3D environments. Sometimes they have to scan the environment. That's a massive industry that utilizes photogrammetry because you look at areas that are modeling them in the CAD program, you can actually go in and scan them. That's how my entry into drones started out. I did a lot of 3D modeling initially around using CAD software, but when I started to see how drones could accelerate, and not just only accelerate the process of modeling existing conditions, capturing as is. So when you model something in a CAD software, it's a virtual representation of what it is. But when you scan with a drone, it's the real world intelligence. That's the game changer. So we'll talk about how you use these data sets between these two programs. We're going to focus on the scan. It's a closed source tool, but it's really one of the best out there. They nailed it. Yes, please go ahead.
What's the cost for a reality scan compared to like a Terra or a 4D?
So for folks like us, I would say that if you're like a small business owner, it's just you, it's free. It's free until you make $1 million a year in revenue. But if government. I think it's not sure. I think it's a couple $100. But it's worth what it's worth. What you're asking for. It's an amazing piece of software. You can use reality scan to create a 3D model of something as small as this and something as large as the entire United States because of 3D type technology, if you have that data. So it's a very powerful software application. That's what we're going to focus on. I highly recommend it in terms of precision, visual fidelity. But if you wanted to start building pipelines into your own platform so that other users can process the imagery, reality scan will not let you do that because it's a proprietary software. Something like with ODM, you will be able to do that. So someone asked earlier about AWS. Say, for instance, I open a drone mapping business for utilities or a drone inspection. Taking images of to create 3D models, and I end up having 25 employees, and they're all capturing data every day. They need to process as quick as they can. With reality scan, you need a single license for each of those persons. But with ODM, Open Drone Map, you can just deploy the open source software to the cloud and give each person a login. And now they just push their data and it processes, it gives you the ability to scale. Does that make sense so far? Just, yes, please go ahead.
Can I put this mic on you?
Yes.
Get so much on this room.
Oh, but can you hear me, Corey?
Well, there's a lot of echo.
Oh.
That's all.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Alrighty. So that's the difference between open source and closed source software. Again, closed source, there's just more organizational structure around it, right? Open source software, it's the community that builds it. We're a very active part of the community. So you use other people's tools and you also contribute to the tools. It's important. If you are looking at monetizing your workflow, we've done courses on drone businesses. And what I at least would say from an area perspective, I think future entrepreneurs should think about how to build platforms for the industry, platform that goes beyond just the individual flying that drone. It can provide more value, it can have more impact at scale. So whether you use open source or you use closed source, it really depends. You would reality scan if you're doing deliverables for clients, right? So you're getting data sets. I mean, you can still deploy reality scan on the cloud. It's just going to be quite expensive. But if you're doing one-off scans for yourself, for an organization, for a small business, definitely use reality scan. It's just an amazing piece of software. So that's the data sets we have. And this is the workflow we are about to walk through with reality scan. Okay, just same thing. Okay, before we move forward, obviously you can do drone mapping and do drone flying. Obviously, most of us are Part 107, so I don't want to spend too much time on this. In open areas, away from people, having signage to mark where you're taking off and landing, and specifically taking off before you take off, having situational awareness around hazards, wires, and trees. Especially if you're doing mapping. Sometimes, because it's an automated mission, you just say, oh, the drone is just going to take off. But before you actually start a drone mapping mission, it's advised that you actually take off the drone manually, get to an altitude where you have, clear line of sight, and then take off from there. Obviously, check weather forecasts, battery health, et cetera, et cetera. Safety reminder for this event, and this is not just the workshop, the entire Vegas drone meetup, if you have a drone, you're trying to fly drones during these events, just because of the amount of people we have potentially flying drones, please just be aware. Do not fly over people. Do not fly over moving vehicles. You can cross quickly over a road if you need to transition from one side to another, but do not fly directly over vehicles. Ensure that your equipment is fine. If you have batteries that are swelling up, please do not use them. Just want to have a safe weekend so that we all go home, safe essentially. And specifically, this industry, you can see with everything going on, what one person does affects everybody. So when you make a decision, an unsafe decision, doesn't only affect you and your business, it also affects a community. So please be mindful of that as well. Just quick tips. Looks like most of us here are Part 107. If you're not a Part 107, well, you could still, as a hobbyist, capture data for mapping, but you just can't use it commercially. But if you're thinking about getting a Part 107, get it. please just do it. It's that certification. You're ready, even if you're not going to use it. But it even lets you unlock certain restricted edge spaces that a hobbyist would not have access to, which Vegas has a lot of that. So please go ahead and get your Part 107. It's always amazing to see the local community grow from people just showing up for the first time, and eventually, a few months later, they get their Part 107. I mean, if you've taken the exam, I feel like if you study, you can pass it. Also, your drones needs to be registered if you're trying to do mapping, especially commercial mapping, obviously. And in some cases, you may need to have insurance as well. I'm going to talk about insurance today, but there are companies like Skywatch that can actually give you insurance per the hour, so you can save money, not pay monthly insurance because you're flying the drones every day. So just a few things to note regarding when you're flying drones for this event, and also specifically when you're doing mapping. For those that are local, this is one of our local, I would say, ambassadors of the community. It's just amazing, Donald Hill. He has the Las Vegas and Hennessy drone pilots. We know there are federal laws with drones, with the FAA, but there are also a lot of states and local ordinances that you need to be aware of. Where do you take off and land? How close are you flying above people's property? Where can you fly in Vegas safely? What airspaces are out there? These are questions that Donald Hill, the founder of the Las Vegas and Hennessy Drone Pilot Group, also actually has a Facebook group, which I highly recommend. A lot of us are very active within that Facebook group. These guys go around talking to cops, asking questions, it's just amazing. And I think we need more resources like this for those of us that are out of state, for compliance. When you're doing mapping, it can get tricky sometimes. So just having good understanding of the local ordinances. It's not just about, I got my 107, I got airspace authorization. You could get fined for trespassing if you're taking off in someone's property and you don't have authorization to be there. So these are just some things that you should know. It's not just about being a Part 107, but this is a great resource. I highly recommend it, and please check it out. Just want to reiterate, we're going to cover quite a lot of information, and I do talk fast sometimes, so please stop me if you have any questions. There are no bad questions. It's all great questions, so please go ahead.
So I guess a lot of software you're using, you have like recommendations for like the CPU and GPU.
That's awesome. So for reality scan, I highly recommend GPU-enabled laptop or desktop. Just something with a GPU. It doesn't have to be like a 590, 5090 or anything like that. So this laptop here can run reality scan. I think it has a 4060 NVIDIA GPU. So for those of us who might not be familiar with, a GPU is just an added chip on your computer that accelerates graphics processing. So when you think about converting pixels on an image into a 3D model, that's a very graphic intensive process. So when you have a laptop or a desktop with you just get faster results, right? That's all it boils down to. So we could talk about specific specs, honestly, but also if you don't want to be bothered with specs, you just want to use online cloud-based processing, those are also available. Drone Deploy does cloud-based processing. I don't know if Pix4D does cloud-based processing. I think they do, but they also have a desktop. Cool thing with doing processing on the desktop is you can do it without the internet, right? You can do it if you're in the middle of nowhere, you're capturing, there's no internet at all. You can actually process. And you have more control over the processing pipeline when you're doing it on the desktop. So you're not just uploading images and waiting and hoping a 3D model comes out. So like I said, there are multiple steps. By doing it on a desktop, you'll be able to go through those steps and make sure that everything aligns, especially if you're doing something that requires high precision and accuracy. In fact, the data we captured for this building, to create the 3-dimensional model for this building, we used 6 GCPs, and I think we achieved a 0.5 centimeter accuracy in that data. So, not if you give that to a licensed surveyor, that would be something that's extremely accurate. Obviously, they would need to stamp something like that to use it officially for any kind of building or permitting, etc. But however, you can still capture this data if you needed to scan your gold mine and you needed precision as to where those things are at. So 0.5 centimeters, that's less than an inch. So you can actually capture that kind of high precision data using a drone. So I can talk to you more about specs later on. It's like it's a whole session. But a decent computer with a GPU. I think this was about. You can find good GPU laptops now, $500, $600, $700. And I think it's an investment, really, when you think about how much you would pay monthly to run this processing on the web. And also, the cloud processing, you run out of storage. Drone data is very, very, very heavy. That's one thing I would just say. Just get ready to start buying external hard drives. So when you upload these data sets to the cloud, you run out of storage a little quicker. So it's one of the reasons why you may want to do your processing locally as well on the desktop. So, but happy to talk to you more about what specs if you're looking to buy a computer for processing. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay, let's look at our actual scanning sites for the day. This is the Henderson Multi-Generational Center. What you see at the bottom is essentially the workflow from start to finish. That's all we're going to talk about during this workshop. Start with mission planning, data capture. Once you have the images, that's where data capture ends. You bring them in, you load them into reality capture. It does something called an alignment, where it essentially pulls the EXIF longitude and latitude information on the drone images and create a initial 3D reconstruction of the scene. And then you go ahead and do meshing. That initial construction turns into a denser point cloud. And after the point cloud is generated, you then use the pixels on the images, the colors, right, to paint the 3D model to then create a textured 3D model. And then we'll talk about auto projection. From that 3D model, you can then create a very high accurate 2D map of the site. And then we'll talk about export options as well, how you export the data, what file formats, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, mission planning. I am a firm believer that some of the best drone missions you could ever do, the best preparation you could do is from the house, right? You could really save a lot of time spending time at home, looking at on Google Earth, it's your best friend, and also the FAA Visualizes website, obviously to understand what airspace am I flying, do I even have compliance? I mean, these things are basic. I think that's part 107, so we all get it, but I just wanted to reiterate it for this workshop. But this specific site, the ceiling, you could get lands up to 200 feet. The ceiling was about 200 feet altitude, so beyond that, you would need further coordination with the FAA. It's also a Class B airspace. So it was fairly open. This part is quite far away from airports, so we're able to capture data without much issues. But there are certain sites closer to the Strip, Nellis Air Force Base, where you may need further coordination. So spend some time looking at your site, at least a good 2-3 weeks before you go out and fly. Because if you need further coordination and you need to do a project at a specific date, and you do not reach out to the FAA on time to get, through Drone Zone, to get authorization for that site, you may not be able to capture your data on the day that you need it. So it's very important, not the day of, several weeks if you can, before your mission, try to just confirm that the airspace is clear, there are no TFRs, no flight zone, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, that's the first thing. Second thing is your drone mapping software. So now you have your site, we know this is Class B, we got our authorization, yay. What do I use? There's a myriad of applications you can use to help control your drone to capture the data. How many people have DJI drones? You got a DJI? Skydio? Okay, hotels? Okay, well, that's awesome. Well, DJI, I mean, you guys, it's just amazing technology. Typically, the way these modern drones now work, they have flight planning software within them, right? So they would have a controller that has a flight planning software that you can use to plan all your missions. But some older drones or some other drones, and sometimes because of advanced missions, you may not even want to use your DJI controller. You actually want to do your mission on the computer. So a lot of times that's what we have to do, especially when it comes to inspections with utility lines. This specific software right here, UGCS, it's a desktop-based drone flight planning software, and it's really amazing to be able to look at a big screen, and be able to plan these missions. It's just more advanced when you do it on a desktop as opposed to trying to do all that stuff on your mobile. But for what we need, specifically for us, we use the DJI pilots. This was the software program we used. But Drone Deploy also has a flight planning software, and it's free to actually download. So you can get Drone Deploy. Like I said, some of these other drones, you can attach your phone to it. So when you download Drone Deploy on your phone or an iPad, you connect it to the actual controller, you can use it to plan your mission. Pix4D, someone mentions Pix4D Capture as well. Pix4D Capture is another software you can use for planning your waypoints. Waypoints are essentially waypoints that the drones are going to take to capture your data. There's UGCS, which I just mentioned, is DJI pilots. There's Waypoint Map. I want to emphasize Waypoint Map because I know a lot of us have DJI minis, right? The Mini 4s, the Mini 3s. Those are not primarily mapping drones, but Waypoint Map is this actually a couple of very smart college kids. They created a software that lets you create drone plans for those smaller drones. And it really unlocks a lot of capabilities where you don't want to fly a big drone, or that's all you have. So if you have a DJI Mini and you still wanted to do mapping and capture data, but the controller does not come with a flight planning software for mapping, you can use Waypoint Map. And obviously, there's Mano Flight. Did you have a question? Yes.
So I know on certain, like on the smaller road, VHR road, a lot of times the controller itself, they don't have get the pace, you can't have those software go away. Well, which one will on those type of controllers?
Yes, good question. So yes, so with those controllers, Waypoint creates a KMZ file, which is a Google file, and you can just put it on the actual SD card that you have your images in, and you'll be able to read that on the controller. Yeah. So yeah, you don't. That's the hack they had around it. Any other questions? We all good with planning software programs? Has anybody used any of these software programs in the past? Which ones? If you don't mind me asking.
I've used Drone Deploy quite often in the past, a little bit of Pix4D.
Awesome. And any other one? Just Drone Deploy and Pix4D? Yeah. I mean, those are, yeah.
I did Drone Deploy, but I did a long time ago. That's what I was going to ask you. I did some mapping like 5 or 7 years ago.
Awesome.
And they wanted to charge like a really astronomical 800 a month. So, did you just say it was free?
No, I did not say Drone Deploy is free. Reality Scan is free. I used.
So keep the file, I won't even touch it. You can like look at it, you can download it or do anything.
So that's one of the things with uploading your data to the cloud, right? And really, I mean, when it's convenient, I do it, but I prefer local. I prefer having total control over my stuff and just knowing that it's safe with me. So there's programs that you can use without paying $800 a month. With where it's at, there's so many solutions out there. Those guys have built a very good business. They've been around for a long time. I have to say, most people started with Drone Deploy and Pix4D, and they're great applications. They're enterprise applications themselves. But for folks like us, those price margins is just a significant barrier. This is the reason why I was talking about WebODM earlier. You can start with that. You can run that on your own. You can get free credits on AWS to run them. You don't have to pay anything for it. And if you do have to pay, it's like $35 compared to $800, like you said. So yeah, it's not cheap. Drone mapping is actually the hardware, the software is expensive. Please go ahead.
What I like to do is try to find stuff that you can start off with free and then learn.
Yes.
And then when you start getting clients and all that stuff, then you can build.
So Reality Scan, because the reason why I recommend it is, again, you use it. It's an enterprise grade software. They give you out for free. But once you become a millionaire, you start paying them. And I think this software used to cost about $3,000 a year. So Epic Game acquired Reality Scan and made it free. So I think it's one of the greatest things that has happened in photogrammetry in the past few years. So I highly recommend Reality Scan. You can download it, just sign up. You don't need to pay for anything. And you can use it commercially as well, but until you start making $1 million. I think that's quite generous for R&D, doing early projects and things of that nature. And it's local. and it's just an amazing tool, right? It does. I've tried. I just I mean, no shade to Pix 4D and these other guys. When it comes to 3D reconstruction, because each of these programs actually sometimes may be better at certain things. Some might create certain orthos a little more, much more better. I think I like the orthos that come with ODM. They're really nice, the open source one. But for 3D modeling, creating 3D accurate models, I think Reality Scan is one of the really great software programs out there that you can use, and it's free. So please go ahead. I think you had a question.
So I'm blessed because I'm grandfathered in on road deploy, so that's my go-to.
Yeah.
Fix where you use Allen, teach Allen,
Yeah.
usually yes, several of those I've done. I was wondering about bleaching, as
Mhm.
far as the actual recent planning.
Yeah.
And capturing. Is that even still around? Because I haven't used it in years.
I haven't either. One thing I know is there's just a myriad of applications out there. And please do not, what I'm saying, these are just recommendations from my experience. So not to discredit Turn Deploy and any of these guys. I'm just showing you the pros and cons of using open source and closed source and paid and unpaid software. Because most of us, a lot of us are entrepreneurs here. It's right. It's like it's not cheap. So as entrepreneurs starting out, you want to try to save as much money as you can. Those of us that work for the government, I mean, it's you have deep pockets more than us. Please go ahead.
I've also found that Max Made Easy is a good program to learn green processing as well.
Exactly. So there's a ton of tools out there. If you go up to Google and just say free drone mapping tools, they'll all be out there. But obviously, we had to focus on one for this workshop. But the concept of photogrammetry is the same, regardless of the software programs. It takes the images, it takes pixels, and it matches points. It takes the coordinates from the images and create a three-dimension. Essentially, use it to paint a three-dimensional picture. So each of these different programs is just becomes a thing of user interface, right, and how intuitive they are. So everything you're going to learn here today about Reality Scan, I will have to say though, not everything that Drone Deploy can do. It's one of the reasons why I'm also recommending it. Drone Deploy is awesome if you're uploading images and you just want results real quick. But if you wanted to do 3D reconstruction with very high precision and high detail, and be able to combine automated flights and manual flights together to fill in those gaps and then create I'll show you some of this stuff later on. I think Reality Scan just has a better workflow for that. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. Any other questions? No? Okay. Okay, let's talk about drone mapping basics and mission plan. I think many of us who already flew with Drone Deploy, you probably already get this. This is what I was talking about earlier. Drone nadir imagery and oblique imagery. It's a very easy concept. Nadir imagery is typically used for 2D maps. Say, for instance, you wanted a map, this building, and all you care about is just looking at it top down. Nadir is when this gimbal on the drone essentially is 90 degrees perpendicular to the ground. So it's looking directly to the ground. There's no tilt. It's on your DJI drone, it will be gimbal settings negative 90 degrees. So it'll be exactly just like this. You want to do that when you're creating 2D maps primarily. Oblique imagery is just the exact opposite. It's when the gimbal is actually slightly tilted to a certain degree, typically within negative 55 degrees to negative 75 degrees, depending on how tall the sides of the structure you want to capture. So this concept is quite important. So if, say for instance, this is a site that we want to capture, it's a tower. If you just cared about looking top down, you would capture nadir imagery, right? But if you wanted to capture the sides of the building, you would have to tilt the camera so you can see the sides of the building. So for this, and sometimes you have to do both so that you can get even more good. In fact, it's advised to capture both. So you use the top-down imagery, the nadir imagery, to sort of set the context, and then use the obliques to capture the details around the subject, essentially. Any questions between nadir and oblique? Any confusions? Is it clear? Yeah? All right, awesome. Quick quiz. Which of these imagery is oblique versus nadir? Let me just say it out loud. Just want to make sure we get it. I mean, it's obvious, but we, oblique? Nadir? Correct. Awesome. Thank you. So as you can see, in this case, the nadir imagery looks at the roof. Great for maps. Oblique, you can see a little bit of the facade of the building. Awesome to create three-dimensional models of buildings or mines or terrains with significant topological changes.
So I do have a question though.
Yes.
So on the oblique, so what's the range as far as angulation? What is, ideally, if you're gonna define an oblique, what is that angle that you're shooting at?
Good question. So when let's just use this analogy. It depends on your site, right? Let's use. I know these are not two great examples. Let's use this water bottle representing a tower, a building with significant height, right? Let's use this GNSS receiver as a maybe a building of this size. Now, when you're flying a drone, uh, like I said, the oblique angle goes, you can go as, it really depends on the drone, but typically within negative 55 degrees, which is slightly tilted, not fully 45 degrees, and negative 75. In this case, where it's like a tower, you obviously want to slightly just, and again, this is something where the best way to confirm this is go ahead, look at your site, fly the drone manually. This is what I do, right? Fly the drone manually first. And when you fly the drone manually, you look at the subject and you tilt the camera just to make sure that, because I could say negative 45 degrees and you use an alternative drone and it's negative 135 degrees. These drones are programmed differently like that, right? Just because of the way they, well, I think if you understand the concept, you'll be able to do it on your own, regardless of the drones you're flying. Say you're flying any drone, just go out there to the site, tilt the camera a little bit and look at your controller. It'll tell you, hey, you're currently looking at negative 45 degrees, for instance. In this specific case, you want the entire camera frame. As you can see in this image, it's showing slightly the roof, obviously the top, but also showing the side of the building. So you need to play with it a little bit. That's why I just don't believe in flying automated missions. You need to, this is the part where you become the pilot, right? Where you go out there and you do a manual capture just to make sure that you see clearly the specific angle that you need for the oblique imagery. For nadir, it doesn't matter. It's always going to be 90 degrees. So for this specific tower, you would want to tilt it just enough and also have the drone flying at an altitude where that makes sense. Right? So if the drone, if you wanted to capture something like this and the drone is right here, no matter how much you tilt it, it's not going to be able to see the things around the sides of the building. So it depends on the height of your structure, so whether a tower or a flat building, and also your drone. But typically, the process I would advise would be go out there, fly the drone manually, capture some area perspectives, get close to the building, anticipate how high you would like to fly based on the information you gather early on, right? And then go back and plan your automated missions with that. I know it's,
When you're doing the oblique
Yeah.
shot, so is there a mark that you're targeted on all the time? So is there like a solitary mark or something that you're looking at in particular
well,
to determine your angulation or anything? Or
I'll show you the mission planning soon, shortly. But typically, the way it works, you draw a grid around an area, and it generates waypoints. And the yaw, roll, and zoom, the tilt, and all of that, it's already pre-created in each of these images. So it's automated. If you wanted a specific point, there's also planning orbit missions, for instance. Say you wanted to do a couple orbits instead of flying a grid, which orbits are really good for structures, actually. So if you had, let's say, a cell phone tower like this, you do a couple orbits around it. In that case, you do an orbit with 45 degrees and do something like 90 degrees all the way all the way around it. So specifically for that use case, you focus on that specific need target. But honestly, a lot of these settings are automated already, so you don't have to worry too much about that. If you just set the gimbal and decide whether you want to do a grid mission, which is typically used for wide, areas, or you want to do an orbit mission. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, most of that stuff was automated, so you set your like.
Yeah.
You set your GCP, then it's gonna calculate all of that for you, what angle and speed distance.
Exactly. So the drone, yeah, like if I put a grid around the site, it already tells me based on my overlap settings, which we'll go through here shortly, and my gimbal, he already like just knows how to capture the data and what the target is. So you don't have to manually set the target for every image. Does that make sense? It's all pre-computed in the waypoints mission. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, so that's oblique and nadir imagery. Obviously, to create a 3D model like this, you needed oblique, and I'll show you the end results later on. Drone flight parameters. Also, I just want to say, if you think we need to take a break, a 5-minute break at an hour mark, please let me know if you feel like we're good to keep going. I'm good. Everyone's good so far? Do I still have everybody? All right, cool. Okay, so flight parameters. Checked out the sites. And I think this will provide more clarity to your question here, Shirley. How do you, I wish I could show you in real time on the controller, but I already have screenshots in my next slides and you see it too. But just to go over concepts. When you're doing a grid mission, there's something called overlaps. So think about this site, the drone flies like this, capturing images, click, 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 goes, captures, goes, and essentially flies a grid. When it goes on this grid and comes here and goes on this grid, I have a slide for that too. There has to be overlap in those images. So, and again, this is pre-computed. So I'm just gonna go through the concepts at very high level. If you have any questions, let me know. But with the following and the slides that I have from here, it will provide more clarity to you. You just need to know for now that front overlap and side overlap is the percentage of overlapping area between two photos. That's what matters. When you're creating 3D models, the photos that you're using to create the 3-dimensional models needs to overlap. Why? Because the computer software needs to know, okay, well, if I look at this tower from this perspective, and I look at it from this perspective, I can still see a part of the tower in that other images. So it uses it to match all of the images together. That's why overlap matters. Again, automated for the most part. For mapping, you would want to use, for a drone like this, it's in percentages. So you'd have a percentage 75 or 80 degrees overlap, 80% overlap, for instance. Obviously, flight speed, how far the drone is flying, how fast the drone is flying. Flight altitude, how high your drone is flying from the ground. And again, this is all parameters you put in. When we captured this site, we flew at 200 feet AGL. There's also something called terrain following. So when like a site like this, actually, the terrain is actually there's a significant change in the terrain. There are drones with capabilities these days, specifically this one, that can follow a terrain at that same altitude. Because when you think about it, for instance, like a mine, you have something that has sort of like a valley at the top. When you're flying over it, the drone needs to make sure that it's actually maintaining the exact same altitude over the ground as it goes over it. That's terrain following. But anyways, that's important when you're planning your drone missions to know about flight altitude. Ground targets and ground sampling distance. This is measured in centimeters or inches per pixel. It's the distance between two consecutive pixels centers measured on the ground. Again, this is software term. I don't think you should care too much about it, but you need to care about ground sampling distance when you care about the end results, specifically for accuracy. So if you get hired by someone, they might ask you and say, hey, we need images to be 1 centimeters per pixel. And that means it's intuitive. So in the software program, when you put 200 feet, for instance, it would automatically adjust the ground sampling distance of your images. So you don't have to manually input this information essentially. Ground smear value, this is the captured motion distortion that occurs while the camera sensor is exposed, while the camera and or target objects is in motion. Again, these are just high level concepts that I'm trying to share. I don't think I need to go that deep into them, but you can spend some more time looking up this information as well. Camera parameters. So what we just covered is parameters that affect the actual drone as it flies, obviously speed, altitude, and so on and so forth. This time we're looking at the actual parameters on the gimbal itself. One of the most important parameter here is shutter speed. This is the time the sensor is exposed to light. I have another slide here that gives you suggested shutter speeds, but honestly, by default, these drones now can just adjust their shutter speeds based on what you need. But typically, over 1,200 and 1,000 would work. It also depends on the lighting situation of your scene, essentially. Aperture, ISO, gimbal angle, again, angle of your gimbal, the focus on the actual target. These are just camera parameters, high-level camera concepts. For most drones, they're handled. You don't have to worry about them, but I figured we'll talk about them so you at least have an idea of what's happening within your drone and also what the camera is doing itself. Lighting conditions. When is the best time to actually fly a drone for capturing data? Typically, it's overcast. So when you have clouds, the reason is you don't want hard shadows in your photos. So if it's like no clouds at all and the sun is shining, there's obviously going to be hard shadows, and that doesn't look very great. And sometimes it can even throw off the processing pipeline. You want to, if possible, capture data when it's cloudy and it's overcast and the sun is down. Ideally. I was just saying I would have more slides regarding overlaps. This is an image that essentially explains the concept of overlap. Please go ahead.
What you just talked about, overcast, I know from my experience, that is very accurate. The flat overcast, have no shadows. But what you will find in the field dealing with companies, they want you shooting middle of the day.
Yep.
Prime time day, sun dead at the top of his peak, and that's when they want you to fly. So a lot of times it's not optimal as we would like it as the operator, but the client wants, in other words, they want the pretty picture.
Yeah.
And not the what actually comes out to be the best picture.
That's true. Yeah. 100. Sometimes you don't. Yeah. 100%. Thank you for sharing that.
So I'm not familiar with the software out there, but seeing, that it would be worthwhile for software to autocorrect for shadows. I mean, is that like a feature of the software now?
Sorry, ask that question again one more time.
So I'm not familiar with the software that's available out there. Don't they have an autocorrect for the shadows?
Good question. So, well, you can run the photos through Photoshop and have Photoshop or Lightroom, right? Edits in Photoshop. I've actually done this. There's something called batch editing, where you take one photo, you make a set of adjustments to that photo. So maybe you desaturate it or you saturate it because of the shadows, and then you apply that batch edit on all your photos. It gets tricky though, because when you do that, the resulting photos that comes out will lose the EXIF data that has the longitude, the latitude, and the altitude that the processing engine needs to geo-reference those images.
So there's no algorithms that are.
There are. There's just multiple steps, and I didn't prepare to go deep into that. If you want to talk about it, I mean, there are PhD research on that stuff too, really, right? Desaturating images automatically and removing shadows from them. There are all kinds of tools, but as far as I know, a lot of these software programs will try already enough to compute the points they need to create a three-dimensional model, but they're not primarily built to remove shadows from your images. That's your job. So the software is just processing stuff. What you give it is what you get out. I think that's probably one of the most important things with drone mapping. Sometimes people are thinking, oh, my problem is I'm using WebODM instead of using reality capture. No, you just need to capture better data. Doesn't matter. Even if you use a quantum computer to run reality scan, if you capture bad data, your map and your model will look bad. So capturing the right data, making sure you're capturing the right oblique imagery, the maps, the auto imagery is very important to get the results that you need, regardless of software. So that's probably one of the most important things. And this is why image overlap is very important. If you need to, typically you just need more overlap so that there is more consistency along the images. But sometimes if you're flying a farm, you might need less overlap. There's a reason behind that. Well, I wouldn't get too deep into it, but typically for these urban settings where we don't have much farms in Vegas, where there is a diverse landscape, you just want to set overlap between 70 to 80%. That's the rule of thumb. If you have an front overlap of 70 to 80% and a side overlap of, you can go as low as 65, you should be fine for most cases. So, but how does overlap works? So the image that's captured, you can essentially see it from the grid. So think about this being the grid that the drone is flying through. The overlap is the distance between, side distance and front distance. So the more close they are, the more overlap that you have, and the better the 3D reconstruction will come out. So just always aim. I always just go 80%. You can't go wrong with 80% overlap most times, and that works. Let's talk about high accuracy georeferencing techniques for maps and models. This might be important if you're working with a surveyor, or you become a surveyor, and you're capturing a site and you're doing recurring scans of that site for change tracking. So think about a construction site or a site that is changing, eroding away, whatever it may be, and you know that you need to capture images over a period of time. Well, guess what? You want to be able to overlay those images so that you can see the changes and everything is anchored very accurately. One of the ways you can create maps that are anchored very accurately is using some of these georeferencing, high accuracy georeferencing techniques. The first is RTK, and again, this is now diving very deep into the surveyor realm, but the concepts are quite, I guess, easy to understand, very high level. RTK stands for real-time kinematics. Typically, you would need a GNSS receiver, like one of these, with a tripod or a pole, and you need a specific point. You can see in this image, this is actually on that side of the building. So this is one of the points that I collected. I will talk about why this is so important. So if you had a site, you wanted high accuracy results, you would want to put some of these ground control points, targets on the ground, and use this GNSS receiver with a pole to collect a very high precision points. What you're eventually going to do is you use those points to recalibrate or to verify the accuracy of the images that came out from the drone. And now I'll show you the results and explain more about this process more. But real-time kinematics, all it is essentially the drone as it flies, it uses GPS, obviously, but the original GPS on the drone is not as accurate. So this puck right here will need a third party. So it connects to the satellite, and the satellite has to connect to another GNSS receiver or a base that connects to the drone. It's a triangulation technique. That's what you're seeing here on the left-hand side. So you could buy your own GNSS receiver. You need at least one, but you can get two so that you can create a base and a rover. Again, this is an entire topic on its own, but I'm sharing it just so that you get the basic concept. It's still the fundamentals. If you want more in depth, maybe we'll do this next time, next year. But when the drone flies, right, right. So this is like, there's a lot that goes into this when you start talking more about accuracy. But at a very high level, you just need to know that the drone connects to the satellite, and the satellite needs another device that it connects with, and then it streams the corrections. It's called a differential corrections between the drone and that device. It's all very physics related. So with that, the drone gets better accuracy. PPK is just a post-processing workflow, and I don't want to go too deep into it. It's essentially you fly the drone, you collect the data, and you go run the data through Opus,
and then they provide you the correction. Essentially, in summary, when the drone flies, it's not as accurate. It needs more devices around it, which actually is at least one, a base that also connects to the satellite that the drone is connecting to, so that it can tell the difference that may exist in the actual real world flights that the drone is flying. That makes sense. So the difference in the inaccuracy, if that makes sense. So just, you don't have to worry. You don't need RTK and PPK for most of your drone missions, at least from what I can see. But on your own, it's worth reading about RTK. You would need one of this. You just need a GNSS receiver. It captures a higher precision signal from the satellites and transmits that accuracy to the drone. That's all it is. And so why do we need this? So when you are trying to capture your site, I'll show you the next image here. You put a bunch of these targets around the site. So think about the perimeter of this site. Say, for instance, you wanted to scan this classroom. You put a bunch of targets around the edges of the classroom, and you go around with this GNSS receiver, and you take points in each of those targets. Those become the high accuracy points that you're going to use to anchor your drone map, so it's very accurate. Is that making sense so far? Any questions? Please go ahead. Good question. Couple of ways. If you are hired by a surveyor, they have things called monuments. You might have heard of monuments, are just known ground points that have been collected by a surveyor. Typically, you would set your ground control points there. If it's a job where there are no monuments on site, these become your monuments. Well, the thing what you need to do, though, is make sure that they do not move when you're flying the drone. Because if they move, and the drone, say, for instance, they're not anchored properly to the ground, and the drone captures an image of it here, and some kind of wind happens and it moves on this side, it would affect your accuracy. So if you anchor this to the ground and you take that point, you also want to make sure that the drone image captures that point. Because what's going to happen is when you process the data, you're going to say, hey, well, wait a minute, this specific point, I actually know the high accurate GPS reading of it because I collected it with this device. So because I know, I am now telling you that this point is equals to this. So use it as your reference to recalibrate all other points. So that's how it fixes your accuracy of your map. That makes sense? Some of this just needs practice. And we cannot, trust me, cover it all in depth in this workshop. But I think this is good information for you to take back home and spend some time doing a little more research. But these are the principles. It's really not that complicated, honestly, once you start to get into it. Please go ahead.
What is it about?
I think you can get this for like $2,000. This is not an MLID. This is an E1 GNSS receiver. But the MLIDs are also very good. Trimble also makes GNSS.
Trimble or Topo.
Yeah, Trimble also makes GNSS receivers. I mean, honestly, if you really want to take mapping seriously, you kind of need to collect ground control points or learn some of the basics of collecting ground control points, because you will eventually need to prove the accuracy, at least just show a report that says, hey, I put in the effort to improve the accuracy of this map. And again, when I walk through the process of actually processing the data we captured here, I'll talk more about ground control point, and it will make way more sense then, so trust me on that. What are ground control points? These are known points on the ground measured with the GNSS equipment or total stations that are used to enhance the absolute accuracy of your map. These are the golden rules for GCP, because you say, hey, I have a site, how do I place my ground control points? So this is typically the workflow. Before you fly the drone, the targets have to be placed and the points can be collected then or after on. The reason why the target have to be placed before you fly the drone is obviously the target has to be seen in the drone images. So you place the targets and you collect the points with this. These are some golden rules. The entire perimeter of your job site should be enclosed by GCPs. Distribute as evenly as possible. So put GCPs enough. How far should you space them? So give GCPs a 50-foot buffer into the flight plan, away from the flight plan edges, buildings, trees, or other tall equipment. This is quite important. So yes, you have to put the GCPs at the perimeter of the site, but you want to, from the very edge of the site, you want to move in about 50 feet, a little more, and capture your ground control points there. Aim for one ground control point every 200 to 300 meters. So a good way to do that is Google. You can actually just go on Google Earth, put a point in a specific location, and draw a line. When you feel like that line is 200 meters, you can find the nearest convenient point around that circumference to place your next points. But these are the rule of thumbs, and you can go back and read more about these as well. But this is an image of we actually collecting a ground control point for this workshop. Let's talk about flight planning now, okay, for this specific building. What I've been talking about so far is just concepts that you need to understand for the workshop. So how do we apply that for capturing this building? So what you're seeing here currently is our mission plan screen capture from the DJI Pilot app. And what I have highlighted, and you see this, sorry if you can, hopefully you can see it, what I highlighted in red are the critical settings that you need. And it's that simple. I know I have gone really in depth into some of these things, and I do not mean to complicate it. A lot of these things are very easy because the settings are there and they're very intuitive. But if you use these settings, most times you'll be fine. So what do we have here? GSD, ground sampling distance, which we talked about earlier on, which will be affected by height and the size of your camera sensor. Altitude, how high you should fly from the ground. Obviously, try to fly higher than the highest object around your site, at least a good 20 to even 50 feet, just to be safe. Overlaps, as you can see. So for this specific project, we use a side overlap of 75%, a frontal overlap of 80%, and a side overlap ratio for the obliques at 70, and a frontal overlap at 70. So you can see the average overlap there is 70, between 70 to 80%. Please go ahead.
So are these preset when you open up the app and then you can adjust it
Yes.
based on your mission plan?
Correct. Yes, they are. So all of these settings, they're already in the app. So you then just change them based on your mission plan. If I show up here and I see there's a tower 200 feet, well, I can't fly 200 feet. Now I have to fly 250, right? So you can make all of those changes here as well. Yeah.
But again, it has to be within your framework of your land's requirements.
Correct. So yes, if you have airspace authorization, I mean, this should go without saying. If you have airspace authorization for 200 feet, you cannot fly above 200 feet. Just don't do it.
Yeah, because this location
It's 200.
for us that knows Henderson, I mean, we're close to the executive airport, can be close to the flight path of Harry Reid as well. And there's some issues of, even when we get over to Cornerstone.
Yeah.
There's some height restrictions over there.
Oh, 100%. Again, I think I said this earlier on. You got to follow the rules. The FAA has these height restrictions for a reason. One of the great ways you could make sure that you didn't forget is to set a ceiling, a flight ceiling. On your on your drone controller, most times, you can set a ceiling on the drone that says, hey, no matter what the circumstances are, this drone cannot go over 200 feet. And because sometimes what the drone will do is when it's about to start your mission or when it just finishes the mission, it takes off to a very high point so that it can return home safely. And when it takes off, if you don't have a ceiling, it could go beyond the altitude that you have approval for. At that point, you're in violation of your approval, essentially. So I typically would set a ceiling. If I have launch approval for 200 feet, I set a ceiling at about 190 or 180 feet just to be safe, so the drone cannot go over that. And at that point, I'm safe. If I have a ceiling of 180 feet and I forget and I put 300 feet on my flight plan, the drone will tell you. The drone will tell you, well, I can't fly more than 180 feet because I have a ceiling. So thank you very much for bringing that up. I think it's sometimes you may need to quickly, I think I've heard this from Greg. And so if anybody comes and asks you, just say, Greg said this up. Sometimes because of certain missions, you might be certain cases. If it's an emergency and there's a helicopter. In fact, I know this because I took the Part 107 course. If there's a manned aircraft that requires you to go up quickly or go down, you can do that just for safety reasons. But when you're flying your missions for this mapping, make sure you fly it within the um, the airspace authorizations that you have, please. I think that's very important. Any other questions? And also, thank you, great question. This is also why terrain following is important and where you take off. Sometimes if you take off from really high ground or low ground and the drone does not do terrain following, well, when the drone flies from a terrain that's low grounds or from high ground to low ground, it might go 300 feet more. So it really depends on where you take off. So where you take off really matters. Typically, you want to take off at the highest point of your site. So if you have a site that has, a slope, go to the highest point of that site. Obviously, one reason is for you to have visual line of sight. You need to always maintain visual line of sight if you do not have a beyond visual line of sight waiver. If you have a waiver, you can do whatever you want, you not have visual line of sight. But most missions, most of us will fly visual line of sight. So when you are actually at the highest level of that terrain, you can see the drone, but you also have that 200 or whatever feet buffer, and you're not having any issues flying beyond the altitude you're supposed to be flying at. So good point, and thank you for highlighting that. But these are some settings. If you have a building like this, and obviously you have the data to you as well. If you have a building like this you wanted to scan, if you use these settings, I think you should be fine. Okay, ground control points. So we used the settings, we flew the drone, we captured the data. But before we did that, we placed ground control points. And these are the points. So when those points are collected, they're saved as a CSV file, just like an Excel file, a file of rows and columns. If you see this map here, each of these dropped pins is where we collected ground control points. These blue ones, not the green ones. So you see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we took 6 ground control points around the perimeter of this site. So this point right here, point 9, is actually right here. That's where we took that point. And then, so these are the high accuracy coordinates that comes from this device. So what we're going to do is, when we go into our processing software, which I will show you shortly, you then take these, right? You take these ground control points coordinates, you upload it to the software, and you tell the software in the images where each of these were taken. So as it recomputes it, it uses it as a reference for accuracy. That's how you get your high accurate map. Any questions on ground control points so far?
So when you have ground control points,
Yes, sir.
you get 6 out around the
Go ahead.
Do you move your receiver to each one of those?
Correct.
And then just capture that data?
Correct.
And then fly your map?
Yes. So you could do it before.
The sequence that you would do?
You could do it before or after. The most important thing is that the target has to be on ground, right? And if you have the pole, you can just take the points right there. What I did here was, when we got to site, we placed the target first, that little, target. We placed all 6 targets, and then it went to the vehicle, and then we took the GNSS receivers, right? And then we collected each point. So you just go in there, you find a fix, and you take the point click, you take all 6 points, and then you fly the drone.
So you're just using the receiver to establish that Excel thing.
Correct.
The drone's not in the air.
The drone is not in the air yet. Yes. So this is you collecting the points. So you go in and you just put, just like we have it right there. Go click, collect point 1, that would be point 9. The other one is point 8, and so on. And so once you have all your points, you'd have the file within, it could, they have storage. You'd eventually have to pull that CSV file. So you already have it. You want to make sure the target is on ground before you fly the drone, because the target has to be seen in the drone images. Because what then happens is, you then take these points and put it in the software and tell the software within those images where those points are at. So it uses it to then create an accurate, because this will get you sub-centimeter accuracy. So because you've collected enough ground control points, you're now informing the software program not to only just use the drone images for the reconstruction, you're also telling it, hey, I know these specific points are this because I captured it with a high accuracy GNSS, and it processes it all together. So the workflow, just one more time, is if this is my target and I have my points and I'm on site, first thing I do is I look at my site, and again, just quick tip, you could use Google Maps. So when you look at your site, you pull Google Maps up, you can just very quickly place your points so that when you're on site, you bring out your phone and you just take a direction to that point, right? Just like you would go from here to McDonald's or something like that. And then you go ahead and put your point there, you put the target first, you collect the GCP, you go to the next one and just collect those GCP. Yes, please go ahead.
Are you using a base rover configuration?
A base or rover?
So you've got, so some people just have like
Yeah.
a GSS for baseball. And
Yeah.
they have a rover configuration.
Yeah, so let me talk real quick about that. So that's a really great question. Yes, please go ahead and repeat it. So his question was, if I got it right, was do you use a base and rover only, or you just use a single rover configuration? And this is where, again, RTK comes in. You will need a base and a rover, so which is two of these. So just real quick, I have that right here. I barely use this because I don't need to. So this is what he was talking about. If you are in an area where you don't have internet connection, you will need to set up a base and a rover. It connects through radio frequency, there's no internet needed, and you can get your. If you are somewhere like here, where you have access to the internet, there is something called Ntrip. Ntrip is, well, I think in Vegas, there are a few base stations. So instead of you bringing your base stations, I think the Las Vegas Water District has a few base stations. So they have these sitting somewhere that can provide you corrections to your rover over the internet, right? So what you would need if you're flying the internet is you just bring your, that's what I did. I do not like setting up bases, man. It's just setting up two of these. What you need is just bring one of these in your device, you connect to the internet, you would need a login information to that course. So it's a continuously operating reference system. That's what the base is that the Las Vegas Water District has, essentially. So what they're doing is they're providing you corrections as a service.
So with whatever software is connected with that, it shows that hotspot.
Yes, yes. So what will happen is when you turn these on, it would look for all the satellites around, right? And when you connect it to the internet, you will need to impute the Ntrip IP address, so the address of the base. So you would need to already have that information. Actually, quick tip: if you actually emailed me, the Las Vegas Water District, and you told them, hey, I'm a professional, I have a Part 107, I want to do mapping, I need a base ID created for me, they will do it. They did it for us. What?
You have to go through approval.
Yeah, they have to go through. Well, right? No, they do not. Sorry. Yeah, let me just say that. Well, at least they did for me. I'm sure they will do some kind of background check. Good thing is be legit. Show you have a business, you have a reason to do drone mapping, and they will give you that ID. It's a game changer. Yes, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, in California, I was a long time Ntrip member when it was free. And it's basically tied to the seismic sensors up and down the state of California, run by the UC system. But now it has converted into a paid program.
Yeah.
Now, so like I said, depends when you get on the bandwagon, if you have to pay for it, or you might have got in early like I did, and I can use it. But my thing is, I have found is that depending upon where that base station is located, can be the difference between the accuracy of your scan.
100%.
Because I don't like using the Ntrip system. It's inconsistent.
Yeah.
It drops out a lot. So I use a base station and a rover to set my GCPs. I have more confidence in that. Got a SIM card chip, put it into the base station. It gathers its own satellites. When I go to a site, I try to find a monument.
Yes.
And a lot of people always say my old days of being a paver and construction, road construction, You will find monument pins in curb settings or at intersections, any city you step foot in. That is a standard practice. So, and you'll probably see them yourself and don't know what it is. It's sometimes like like about this side diameter marker.
See if I can pull it
sitting
up.
in the asphalt or curb head face, and that will be your survey or reference point to start your first. Or you can set your GNSS system, your base station. There they go, right there, on that marker, and that could be your first reference point going from there. Because then you know by your deviation numbers, all areas have a deviation. I can call it algorithm or whatever for each area that would coincide with that deviation.
100%. No, like I thank you for emphasizing that. Yes, the distance from your base to your rover can affect your accuracy sometimes, and there's so many other factors. I agree. I mean, most surveyors, seasoned surveyors, you probably know, it's always just better to set your rover and your base. But honestly, sometimes if I don't care so much about that accuracy for what I need, because sometimes you do not, you can just use Ntrip. And if that's the only option you have, you can use Ntrip as well. But it's always advised, if you're going to get one GNSS receiver, get another one. It gives you that, the ability to essentially collect a point wherever you may be. Yes.
RTK to go is free.
Yes.
It is here in Vegas. It will work.
Okay.
To the other gentleman's point, I would not rely on it.
Okay.
For huge actors, you're going to try to sell something to a customer that needs your half or full set of your
Yeah. So you would need a tripod and a tri-brack. We didn't want to set up a base and a rover for this project. It's a workshop. We're not delivering the deliverables. But you would need a tri-brack and a tripod. It's always good to collect points from monuments because those points are known and you can compare with the readings that have been taken in the past. So those are great tips. So I really appreciate you pointing those out. But just so you know, someone asked why you would need a base and a rover. Ntrip is one of the ways you can get corrections if you don't have a base. So thank you.
So is there a minimum number of GCPs you need to set up?
Do you have any thoughts?
I would describe it as kind of imagine your area like a table, and then you could want to have like legs at the table. Where imagine your legs at the table and where you want to have your GCPs.
Correct.
And like you brought up, bringing them about 50 feet, but instead of usually having 4, it's almost a minimum of 6.
Yes.
And then they want to be off-center also. You don't want to be perfectly square.
Yeah. So in this specific case with this building, we took 6 GCPs. So yeah, I mean, it really depends also on what your end goal is as well. So there's a minimum of 6. That's what we did here. We just thought it was needed, and it covered all the areas we wanted to capture GCPs at. But the distances between them, obviously, those are things that matters. Where you put them, obviously, they need to see the sky so the drone can see them. So you can't put a GCP under. Well, you can. Sometimes a monument might be under a tree. And that's where you might need LiDAR to capture that data, for instance.
So is it dependent on the size of the object? That you
yes, the size of the area, correct. So the bigger your property, the more GCPs you need, essentially.
So if you're just doing like an individual home, 3?
I mean,
You get away with
I would take at least all 4 sides. I would take at least all 4, and maybe 2 more in between them. So as you can see here, for instance, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So yeah, I think I would take at least all 4 sides. I mean, 3 should be fine, but like if you can do 3, you can do 4.
Well, I guess it's like anything else when you're doing anything that is related to mathematics.
Yep.
The more you have,
Exactly. Right.
the better your result
Will be correct. Yeah. So I think rule of thumb. I think 4 to 6 to start out, and then just add more depending on the size of your property. It's a good point. Like this is a really good conversation about GCPs. This is a very important. Yes, please go ahead.
But if there's too many of them, don't they just become checkpoints?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having more checkpoints. If there's too many of them, you just have more points to use for your accuracy. So I don't think there can ever be too many.
Okay, I wasn't, it's
Are you talking about type points? Because I know that's a, yeah, please go ahead.
I understand what she's saying. There's been studies showing that once you hit 10 GCPs, your accuracy doesn't increase.
Right.
So they say 10 is probably, depending on the size of what you're doing, they say 10 is about the ideal location for a large site like this facility here. 10 would be about the max what you get because you will not get any more by adding 12, 14,
Right.
16. It doesn't change the accuracy at all. And like you said, it may just check it into a checkpoint, which checkpoints are just a redundancy
Right.
of a GCP,
Yep.
just like the RTK is redundancy of GCP. That's what they're all for. It's all about one checking the other. The old school method is the GCPs. RTK is the new beast in the industry. So one verifies the other.
And so in reality scan, it's called type points. And we'll talk about that shortly. So yeah, that's what it's called. I know Pix4D, I think that's essentially, so they can be used as reference to essentially check and make sure that everything is, well, yeah, I didn't know after 10, honestly, that the accuracy couldn't go beyond that.
That's just been a general number
Right.
that's been thrown
Okay.
out there of some people who've done some testing.
Right.
It doesn't have to be exact. I mean, depending on how large of a site, you may need to have more than 10.
Yeah.
You're talking
totally.
about something that might be, I've done sites that have been over close to 500 acres. Might need more than 10 GCPs
100%. Yeah.
because of the distance.
Yeah, 2,000 acres. Yeah, no, so for reality scan, you would use those as type points, but yeah, they're the exact same thing. Type points, checkpoints, reality scan. I'm just saying it so that you know that's what it's called in reality scan. Okay, let's talk about the actual process. So we've captured our data. We now have the imagery. We have the GCPs. And also, I didn't say this, when we flew the drone, we had RTK enabled. I don't have to say more than that. But the tools for processing WebODM and reality capture in the drive and in the information I will be sending you after the workshop, links to download these files or the actual tools themselves will be up, so you should be able to download them. They are all free. So if I send you a link and it say you should pay something, email me, there's something wrong. These are all free tools. But this is the workflow. You import your images, then the computer handles the remaining steps. That's it. Well, thank you very much. That's the end of the workshop. That's one way to do it. Drone Deploy, Pix4D, a lot of these software applications, they've made it that easy. Even Reality Scan, they have something called a map wizard that will go take you through a bunch of steps, just asking you a few questions, and then it runs the entire processing pipeline. That's one way to do it. If you needed a quick data capture and you needed to process it really quick, just use a map wizard, upload the images, and just wait for your results. However, we're going to talk about the entire process and why you need to know about that process. So how it typically works is you import the images, you align those images using ground control points and type points. You build a point cloud from those images, and then you generate a textured mesh. What that is when you create that point cloud, the computer goes in and draws a triangle around every single point to create a watertight mesh, right? Or a surface. And then that surface would initially be gray. From the images, it then colorizes or textures the model. And from that 3D model, you then create a 2D auto projection to create an auto mosaic. And then you export your deliverables. So these are the steps the computer will just run automatically. But Reality Scan has a workflow that lets you curate each of those steps. And I'm just going to jump deeper into it. So data processing pipeline, some more technical terms for them. Again, take the images, you align them, you add the GCPs, you create a dense point cloud, you create a mesh, you simplify, and you export. Okay, well, this is the workflow we used for this building. First thing we did is to align the images. So when you open Reality Capture, again, these videos are all provided to you, just going step by step in how it's done. You have to go in and select all of your images. So in this case, we had 700 images between two folders, and we This is me selecting this second set of images, and then you open them, and I want to pause here. A couple of things that you can see after you've loaded the images, you can see it tells you the count right here at the bottom. Can everybody see the screen? Just make sure. Is it hard? Okay, let me zoom in. Oh my God, they wouldn't let me. Let me see if I can. Well, YouTube would not let me. But anyways, I'll say it out loud and you can watch. This classroom is rather far from the screen, so my apologies. This is what I was given. But anyways, 738 images. The reason why you want to confirm this, if the images loaded are not the exact same amount of images that you captured, then something might be wrong. So you just need to confirm. And how might you also confirm that? Typically, when you load these into Reality Capture and you click Next, you also need to set the coordinate system. In this case, we're using NAD 83, Nevada Central. And here is your initial scene. So what the software is doing here is saying, hey, you've loaded 738 images that are geotagged. I said this earlier, when the drone is flying and capturing these images, it adds a GPS coordinates to each image. So when you load the images into the software program, it reads their metadata and pulls those GPS coordinates. And it then says, oh, well, I see in this image that it was taken here because of these coordinates, then so I'll put this icon here. So what you're seeing is the software actually reading all of 738 images and putting them exactly where it believes they were taken based on the coordinates in the images. So that's the first step. Load the images in. As you can see, and now, yeah, this is actually using the wizard. I mean, just these steps, once you hit go, it starts processing. This is using the reality and map wizard. So it's gonna calculate. You can't see it here, but it says it's gonna do reconstruction, simplification, and texturing. Once you do that, you wait for a couple hours, depending on how large your data set is, you would have your 3D model. But obviously, if you wanted to do a little more, this is how you get the alignment workflow. So you go in, you click inputs, obviously you load the images again. And I created these videos so that you could go back home and just follow the steps. They don't necessarily need to run the entire process here. So you would have loaded all your images. And once that's loaded, the next, you hit align, and this is what you're going to see, right? So this is the initial sparse point cloud that we created based on the images that was captured. So Reality Capture takes those images and says, I see all of these images. I'm going to attempt to create an initial very rough sketch of what I think the scene is. So it georeferences the images and then generates a sparse point cloud. And with this sparse point cloud, this is where you now bring in your GCP scan. So just to go back, you align the images first, now you have your sparse point cloud. This is probably one of the most important videos that you should watch if you care about accuracy in reality scan. So what we're doing is after we've created a sparse point cloud, we're now going into that sparse point cloud and we import the GCPs, which the previous video documented that, into the software. And what I'm doing here currently is I'm going into the software program and I'm saying, hey, this point right here, I have the coordinates and I'm moving it exactly to where it needs to be, if it's over a monument or the midpoint of the actual target. So this video goes through me just putting all 6 ground control points within the software. You need to spend some time watching the video. This is quite important. So I'm going around, I think towards it's actually about 6-minute long video, right? So you can see, this is me just, yeah. So you can open the images to the right-hand side and the 3D scene on the left. The reason is because there is most times a slight deviation in coordinates from the drone images and the GCPs, you might need to adjust the drone images to let it know exactly where those GCPs were taken. So at the end, you would have had multiple images within the software where you've instructed the software exactly where the GCPs are at. So that's essentially what I'm doing here. So at the end, I think it had, yeah, so it's a process that, it's not just as easy as loading the GCPs. You actually need to make sure that the images know exactly where those GCPs are at. And that's why I was saying earlier on, when you fly the drone, just make sure that the drone actually sees those ground targets. Again, these videos will be provided, and I know it's kind of probably a little hard to see. And you'll be able to see how I actually did the ground control points. Once you've added the ground control points, you run align again, and now it uses those ground control points to align the point cloud again, the sparse point cloud. And this is the alignment report that comes out of it. So what it's saying, essentially, it's comparing the drone images, the accuracy, to the points that were collected. And obviously, because I wanted to show you the difference between the reconstruction reports before GCPs and after GCPs. I'll probably add that slide before I send it out as well, and you see the difference. But the value to care about more here is right at the bottom here. Let me see.